They gave her $10 million and gave me a legacy they tried to bury. Hi, I'm Lainey. I was the daughter they shut out, the one they labeled ungrateful for not playing their game. But when the will was read, and the lawyer uttered those words, I watched their world collapse in real time. What would you do if the family that discarded you suddenly had to answer to you? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your story too. Let's go back to the moment everything changed. The room smelled like polished wood and cold ambition. I sat at the very end of the long mahogany table in the conference room of Benton and Carter LLP, my back straight, hands folded neatly in my lap. No one spoke to me. They hadn't in years, unless it was to blame, correct, or dismiss. My family was spread out like royalty around the room, all dressed in navy, gray, and smugness. Lucinda, my mother, sat near the head with her signature pearl earrings and a perfectly curated scowl. Garrett, my father, swirled a glass of club soda like it was aged scotch. And then there was Chelsea, my younger sister, crossing and uncrossing her legs, giggling with a cousin she hadn't spoken to in months. She didn't notice I was there. That was typical. Chelsea's going to run the company, of course. I heard one of the distant uncles whisper to his wife. It's been clear for years. I said nothing, just listened. Mr. Benton cleared his throat, standing before us with a large envelope in his hand, rimmed glasses catching the light from the chandelier above. The air in the room stilled. He opened the envelope with a practiced ease. In accordance with the last will and testament of Mr. Wendell Drew, he began, the estate will be distributed as follows. Chelsea sat forward, her smile predatory. Lucinda folded her hands with regal grace. Garrett smirked. Mr. Benton's voice remained calm. To Chelsea Drew, $10 million in unrestricted funds. A small round of applause followed. Chelsea let out a laugh like she'd just been crowned queen. That's Daddy's faith in me, she said, flicking her hair. I felt the heat of their stares, expecting me to shrink further into the chair. Mr. Benton paused. And to Lainey Drew, effective immediately, the position of Chief Executive Officer of Drew Enterprises shall be transferred solely and irrevocably to her. Silence. Then, what? Lucinda shot to her feet, hands flat on the table. Garrett's glass clinked hard against the wood as he forgot to swallow. Chelsea's face froze mid-smile, eyes darting toward me for the first time in years. I didn't move, didn't speak, just met Mr. Benton's gaze. She can't run a company, Lucinda hissed. She barely attended board dinners. Mr. Benton didn't flinch. Mr. Drew's instructions were clear. Miss Lainey Drew has undergone direct mentorship for the past 5 years and was his selected successor. Lucinda turned to me, voice tight. This is a mistake. You're not ready for this. You don't belong in that chair. I stood slowly. The air snapped like a breaking bone. No, I said. You just made sure I never got close to it. I walked forward, heels clicking against the floor like a countdown. Mr. Benton handed me the sealed executive folder. You heard him right, I said, turning to the room. I'm your new boss. Gasps. A cough. One of the investors dropped his pen. Lucinda looked like she might faint. Garrett went red. Chelsea looked small. I turned toward her, lowering my voice so only she could hear. That $10 million? You'll need every penny of it. Then I turned away. As I left the room, I passed a boy, my cousin's kid, who tugged at his mother's sleeve. Who's she? He whispered. His mother didn't answer. But Mr. Benton caught my eye and gave me the subtlest of nods. I caught my reflection in the glass as the elevator doors closed. My eyes paused on the gold watch Garrett wore, once promised to me. It didn't matter anymore. I had something better now. Control. And they would never see it coming. Lucinda was trembling now, though she tried to mask it behind an icy exterior. You think a title changes anything? You've never carried this family. You've never sacrificed like we have. I turned slowly, facing her completely for the first time in years. Sacrificed? You mean the years I paid your taxes, Garrett's medical bills, Chelsea's tuition, while being told to be grateful for leftovers? Garrett pushed back his chair. That was family business. You never understood the long game. I stepped closer, each word deliberate. I understood enough to know that you were never playing for anyone but yourselves. From the corner, Chelsea finally found her voice. You're doing this to punish us. Grandpa wouldn't have wanted a war. I met her gaze evenly. No, Chelsea. He wanted a future. You wanted a crown. Mr. Benton cleared his throat again, but this time not to interrupt. He was holding space. A quiet support. I looked around at the rest of the room. The board members. The advisors. The silent watchers who had smiled through every injustice. Starting today, I said, voice carrying, this company answers to truth, not tradition. A murmur rippled through the room. The camera flashes from reporters returned. One of them whispered into a recorder. Lainey Drew, ghost child turned power heir. I turned back to Mr. Benton. Is there anything else? He shook his head. Just one thing, Miss Drew. He opened a velvet box and handed it to me. Inside, my grandfather's fountain pen. Not gold, not flashy, just solid, matte black. Heavy with intent. He asked me to give this to the new CEO. Lucinda gasped softly. Garrett turned his back. Chelsea stared at the pen like it might bite her. I took it, and with it, every right they thought they denied me. If they thought giving me the title would scare me off, they don't know me at all. The elevator chimed as it reached the 33rd floor of Drew Enterprises. The door slid open to reveal the sleek, glass-walled executive floor, a place I hadn't stepped foot in since the day I suggested merging our failing logistics unit, a plan Chelsea later pitched as her own. I walked past the receptionist desk, where a young woman in a navy blazer stood up so fast she almost knocked over her coffee. Ms. Drew, she stammered. Ms. Drew. Not Lainey. Not the other one. I nodded once and kept walking. Flashbacks tugged at the edge of my mind, sitting outside boardrooms while they made decisions about campaigns I built, watching Chelsea's face on press releases I ghostwrote, Lucinda's voice always crisp. You're too emotionally involved, Lainey. Let someone else present. But today that changed. The executive conference room loomed at the end of the hallway. Inside, I could already hear Garrett's laughter bouncing off the glass walls, Chelsea's too loud voice rising, and Lucinda's clipped tone taking control. I opened the door without knocking. The room fell silent. Lucinda blinked. You're early. I stepped in. No. I'm right on time. Garrett leaned back in his chair with a smirk. You're here for the inheritance tour? Cute. I met his gaze. No. I'm here for the audit. Chelsea's smile twitched. Audit. I'm the CEO now. My first act is to clean house. Lucinda stood slowly. You may have the title, Lainey, but control still runs through this table. Nothing moves without board consent. I turned toward her. You're welcome to challenge the will in court. But until then, I suggest you sit down. Lucinda didn't budge. Instead, she pulled out her phone and began dialing. Jonathan? It's Lucinda. We need to file an emergency injunction. Mr. Benton's voice echoed from the screen at the far end of the room, connecting via video. Good morning. This is being recorded as per Mr. Wendell Drew's posthumous instruction. For clarity, Miss Lainey Drew has full executive authority and need not seek approval for operational action. Lucinda's fingers curled tightly around the phone. One of the board members exhaled audibly. Chelsea stood up and approached me, all faux calm. Can we talk privately? I nodded, knowing full well what this was. She led me to a side corridor. Look, she began, I know you're hurt, but we can make this work. Together. My eyes drifted to the small mic clipped under her collar, hidden in the lace of her blouse. I reached forward, plucked it out gently, and crushed it between my fingers. Her jaw dropped. I grew up in your lies, I said flatly. I can smell one a mile away. Have you ever discovered that the people who raised you also taught you how to lie just to survive? If you've ever had to unlearn the love that hurt you, drop a comment number 7 below. Now, let's see what I did next. Back in the boardroom, I called the CFO. Have legal and finance lock all external transfers. I want every outgoing transaction in the past 90 days flagged and reviewed. Lucinda's voice was ice. You're dismantling decades of process. No, I said. I'm dismantling decades of cover-ups. Then I turned to the screen. Play it. The projector hummed. Static, then a private video of Grandpa Wendell speaking directly into the camera. If you're watching this, Lainey, it means I'm gone, and I trust you've got your hands full. Chelsea loves attention. You love results. That's why you're in charge. Lucinda's expression cracked. Garrett turned pale. Chelsea looked like she'd been slapped. The room frozen. One of the board members, a man Lucinda had always called her lapdog, stood up, walked over, and peeled the nameplate reading chair Lucinda drew from the wall. He handed it to me. A quiet act. A loud message. I didn't smile. I just accepted it. Lucinda's eyes narrowed as she stepped around the table, gripping her coffee so tightly that the porcelain cracked in her palm. You think this is your moment? She hissed. Everything in this company exists because of me. A drop of coffee hit the carpet. No one moved. Your moment ended the second he died, I replied. She hurled the broken cup into the trash, without blinking. You don't have the spine for this. I have the receipts, I said coolly. The tension in the room thickened, but I didn't flinch. One of the assistants from accounting appeared at the door, clearly uncomfortable, holding a small folder. He hesitated before entering. Miss Drew, the transactions you flagged earlier. We've already found 4 with offshore routing anomalies. I turned toward him.
Good. Keep going.
And reroute all oversight to my desk. The assistant's eyes widened as he looked at Lucinda, then at me. He gave a short nod. Yes, ma'am. And there it was, the shift. Not Mrs. Drew. Miss Drew. Garrett gave a humorless chuckle from the corner. God, this is a circus. I turned to face him. Then take off your clown shoes, Garrett, and watch how a real executive works. The boardroom pulsed with the weight of what wasn't being said. Behind the frosted glass, the city churned like an audience outside a stage. Later, when the video ended and the nameplate was placed into my hands, Lucinda didn't speak. Her silence was louder than any outburst. But her knuckles were white, her jaw locked. After everyone left, I walked back through the corridor. On the wall outside the main boardroom hung a large oil portrait of my grandfather, his eyes sharp even in canvas. I stopped. The late sunlight cast half of his face in gold. I'll do it right this time, I whispered. Then I stepped into his old office, now mine, and closed the door behind me. I opened the drawer. Inside, a red folder marked private. I flipped it open. A single document sat inside, a transfer authorization to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Signed by Lucinda. Dated 3 days before Wendell Drew's death. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. Now I had proof. And war. They want war? Then I hope they're ready to lose everything they once stole. It had only been a week since I took the CEO seat, but Drew Enterprises felt like a hive of whispers and suspicious glances. Emails paused mid-sentence when I walked past. Conversations died in the break room. Rumors spread faster than memos. At 8:05 a.m., the moment I stepped out of the town car, the paparazzi were already there, snapping, shouting, swarming. "Lainey, is it true you threatened a senior manager? Did your grandfather force the board to accept you? Do you have anything to say about the leaked emails?" I kept walking. Silence was my scalpel. But inside, I burned. Just 2 hours earlier, a gossip blog had released a supposed anonymous source claiming I had psychological instability and was emotionally unfit to lead. The article cited fake emails, fabricated nonsense implying I'd bullied Chelsea, and tried to rewrite financial records. It worked. Stock trembled. The board went quiet. I knew where it came from. Chelsea's voice, pitched high and breaking, hit the internet at noon like a nuke. Her video had been shot in soft light, framed carefully. "I've tried so hard to protect my sister," she cried into the camera. "But she's tearing down everything my father built." I begged her to stop. I begged. Within hours, the clip had 1 million views. Sympathy flooded in. Her followers lapped it up. I almost flinched when I saw Garrett on CNBC that night, sitting upright in a gray suit that didn't quite hide his discomfort. "Lainey is bright," he told the anchor. "But she's always been sensitive. We just want what's best for the company. Stability. Safety." He smiled like a grieving parent. I stared at the screen with disgust. It was coordinated.
And it was working.
That night, unable to sleep, I found myself scrolling through an old folder on my phone, screenshots from 6 years ago. One in particular still burned. "Dear Lainey," it read, "thank you for applying to the Drew Enterprises summer program. Unfortunately, we are unable to offer you a position this year." I remembered the sting of that email, especially because 2 weeks later, a company-wide newsletter had proudly announced, "Chelsea Drew joins as honorary media liaison for summer campaigns." Her job? To pose for photos and curate her Instagram feed. I had built pitch decks. She had picked filters. I was not going to let history repeat itself. As I reviewed the morning reports, my inbox pinged, a message from an anonymous company account. No subject. Just a single line of text. "I once got assigned to serve wine at Chelsea's girls-only party in the conference lounge. Past midnight. Please make it stop." I didn't reply. I archived it carefully. Later that day, while waiting for the board to convene for a private review, I stood alone in the executive restroom. The mirror was merciless under LED lights. My eyes were sharp, but my jaw clenched tight. "Don't let them drag you to the bottom," I whispered to my reflection. "You rise. You lead."
My phone buzzed again.
A new alert. Chelsea was live streaming. I rushed back into the hallway where the news screen was broadcasting her teary-eyed monologue. The screen shook slightly, clearly filmed on a phone. Her voice cracked just right, the background a carefully staged family photo. "She's not who she says she is," she sobbed. "She's broken. Dangerous. I'm afraid of her." The camera panned awkwardly, as if held by a trembling friend. The effect was cinematic. Viral. The lights in the hallway seemed to dim as I stepped into the boardroom, the warm tones from the sun giving way to a cooler, clinical cast, the world reacting to betrayal. I started the meeting without preamble. "You've all seen the latest smear campaign, but truth doesn't need a filter." With a nod, I had the AV team play the unreleased clip. Grandpa, weary but firm, sitting at his desk weeks before his passing. "If my wife or daughter tries to take this company," he said into the lens, "stop them. They lost the right to lead the day. They put ego before ethics." Silence. The reporters leaned in. Pen scratched. I wasn't finished. I took the podium again. As of today, Drew Enterprises will undergo a full third-party audit, including all departments and legacy executive records. Transparency isn't a trend here, it's policy. A few board members exchanged glances.
Good.
Let them sweat. Then came the real blow. Before we wrap, I'd like to show one more thing, I said. It was grainy, pulled from internal security archives, time-stamped 3 months prior. Chelsea, clearly intoxicated, screaming at a junior designer, pushing over a display case, knocking a plant into a wall. This was handled internally, I said, but transparency applies to everyone, including my own blood. The room burst into questions. Was she disciplined? Did HR cover this up? Are there more tapes? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. From the corner of the room, Lucinda stood, her face unreadable. She turned slowly, marched to the side table, and without a word, swept a vase of fresh white orchids to the floor. Ceramic shattered. No one spoke. Even Garrett flinched. An hour later, #JusticeForLaney trended. Public opinion flipped. Comments flooded in. Finally, a CEO with backbone. Where was this energy before? Chelsea's done. Back in my office, a sealed envelope sat neatly on my desk. No return name. Inside, a copy of a transfer log. Lucinda's signature. $3.8 million moved discreetly into an offshore account. The date? The same week Grandpa fell, unexpectedly ill. I looked out the window as Philadelphia pulsed beneath me. One hand tightened around the paper. A low beep notified me of a delivery. I returned to my desk. Inside the mail tray, another envelope. Handwritten. I slid it open slowly. Inside wasn't just a copy of Lucinda's offshore transfer, but a photocopy of a letter Grandpa had penned but never mailed. Laney is the only one who listened when I was still lucid. If anything happens to me suddenly, look at Lucinda. I stared at the words, frozen. The puzzle was assembling itself faster now. And someone unknown wanted me to see it all. This wasn't just business. This was war. If they want to weaponize the law, they better pray I don't make it my battlefield. I stepped out of the black SUV in front of the Pennsylvania State Courthouse. The chill in the morning air did little to numb the heat under my skin. Tobias Ng walked beside me in a charcoal suit, briefcase in hand, calm as ice. Flashbulbs lit the sidewalk. Reporters shouted my name. I said nothing. One headline flashed across the ticker on a screen nearby. Drew family implodes. Matriarch sues daughter over CEO power grab. I didn't flinch. Inside the marble halls, the buzz was thick. Local citizens, bloggers, financial pundits all elbowing for space. The room was packed. It wasn't just a legal dispute, it was a spectacle. Tobias turned to me just before we entered the courtroom. Stay silent unless I signal. They'll come out swinging. I nodded once. Lucinda was already seated at the plaintiff's table, draped in gray like a war widow. Her face was solemn, not a hair out of place. Garrett sat stiffly beside her, nervously tugging his collar. The judge called the session to order. Lucinda's lawyer launched first. My clients, Mrs. Lucinda and Mr. Garrett Drew, contend that Miss Laney Drew has exploited a moment of grief to seize control of Drew Enterprises through undue influence, intimidation, and psychological manipulation. He clicked a remote. Projected on the screen were screenshots of emails. These emails, he declared, are aggressive. They show threats of public humiliation. Our client was deeply disturbed. Tobias stood slowly. Your Honor, we can test both authenticity and context. The emails have been selectively cropped. He produced a folder, handed it to the clerk. These are the original threads. You'll find Miss Drew's tone is professional, direct, and fully within her rights as acting CEO. The judge skimmed, eyes narrowing. Then it was our turn. Tobias activated the main monitor. Slide after slide unfolded. Bank records, copies of utility payments under my name, statements from vendors confirming my oversight, and finally, the handwritten note from Grandpa to Mr. Benton. Lainey is the only one I trust with Drew Enterprises. If Lucinda ever attempts to take control, stop her. Gasps echoed through the room. I kept my eyes forward. The next witness was called, a former junior executive. He hesitated at first, then took a shaky breath. I worked under Chelsea Drew, he said. There were incidents. She once ordered an intern to attend a club appearance as her assistant. The bill, $8,300, was filed as digital marketing outreach. Murmurs rippled. Lucinda's jaw tightened. Tobias stepped forward. Your Honor, we now submit a counterclaim. The plaintiffs have knowingly filed a frivolous suit, utilized media manipulation to incite harassment, and may be actively involved in misappropriation of company funds. He set a thick folder on the bench. We also request a restraining order to prevent any direct contact with Miss Drew for the duration of this investigation. The judge leaned back, hands steepled. A beat passed. Then another. I find the plaintiff's claims lacking substantial evidence. The court hereby dismisses all accusations against Miss Drew. Furthermore, we will open a formal inquiry into potential financial misconduct within Drew Enterprises, effective immediately. The room exploded. Phones buzzed, cameras flashed, hashtags raced across social platforms. Hashtag Justice for Lainey, hashtag Black Widow of Justice. Lucinda's lips parted in shock. Garrett's shoulders slumped. From the benches, I heard someone whisper, "That girl is the one who saved the company 10 years ago." As I waited for the judge to return from recess, my eyes wandered and the memory struck. 10 years ago, the company was on the verge of default. Garrett and Lucinda were scrambling, trying to sell assets. I, barely 23, used my own credit to co-sign a bridge loan that kept the doors open. No one thanked me. Lucinda had held my hand back then and whispered, "Families don't need contracts. We need trust." They remembered the loan, but not the name that signed it. Now they were suing me. The court resumed. A thin beam of light filtered through the tall courtroom windows, cutting sharply across Lucinda's face. She stared forward, a frozen tear on her cheek. Not a single muscle moved. The cameraman zoomed in. Each new document Tobias submitted echoed with camera shutters and the low murmur of press scribbling. When the final ruling came, it wasn't just justice. It was thunder. We exited through a side corridor. Tobias opened the car door. Then came the sound of glass shattering. I turned. Lucinda had slammed her fist into the mirror of her own car. Blood streaked the side panel. Her face twisted, not in grief, in rage. Tobias slipped into the seat beside me. They won't stop. But now, we control the playing field. I nodded once. An aide handed Tobias a sealed envelope. He passed it to me. Inside was a confidential report. Chelsea had signed a consulting agreement with a shadow firm tied to Marlowe Holdings, the same conglomerate that once tried to buy us out. The ink on the contract was barely dry. And Lucinda was CC'd. Betrayal wasn't a moment. It was a business plan. They built an empire on lies. I just turned on the lights. The morning of the shareholder meeting, the entire lobby of Drew Enterprises buzzed with a storm waiting to break. Reporters set up outside, drones hovered for aerial footage, and inside, the silence throbbed with tension. A 75-page dossier had gone out to every stakeholder overnight. It wasn't just a report. It was a reckoning. Each page bore the weight of truth, falsified financial reports, secret offshore transfers, proof of insider trading. There were email threads where Garrett personally approved slush funds disguised as executive bonuses, and spreadsheets showing Chelsea's club expenses charged to corporate marketing. And at the center of it all, Lucinda's digital signature on a contract negotiating a buyout with a foreign conglomerate. When I walked into the boardroom, it was already full. Lucinda stood near the center, trying to seize control with her usual grace. "We are a family business," she began, her voice warm but strained. "And what my daughter is doing, tearing this family apart publicly, is disgraceful. Drew Enterprises was built on legacy." I let her speak, let her unravel. Then I stepped forward. "Legacy isn't immunity," I said, placing the final piece on the table. "And your definition of family has always excluded accountability." I played the audio file. Tobias's voice was crisp. "Lucinda, you do realize selling controlling shares to Marlowe Holdings without disclosure violates 5 separate board policies?" Lucinda's voice in reply was colder. "I'm not staying to clean up this mess. I'm cashing out while I still can." The room exploded. Several shareholders stood up, shouting questions. Cameras rolled as one investor pounded his fist on the table. "You were planning to sell us out." I waited until the noise broke into a fever pitch. "I hereby call for a vote to remove Lucinda and Garrett Drew from all positions, honorary and operational, and restrict their access to corporate matters for the next 10 years. Silence dropped. Votes were cast. 83% in favor. Lucinda stood motionless as her nameplate was removed. Garrett looked around, eyes wide like he'd just woken up from a dream. In the chaos, security slipped Chelsea out the side door, where she was immediately swarmed by federal agents. Her violation of SEC disclosure laws had triggered a separate investigation. As she was led into the black vehicle, a red lipstick tube fell from her purse and rolled across the pavement. The cameras caught it. Her image, flawless and curated, was cracked wide open. Downstairs, I stood before the entire company in the main atrium. Every employee, every department head, interns and engineers alike stood shoulder to shoulder. "Starting today," I said into the mic, "Drew Enterprises is no longer run by blood. It's run by truth." Applause erupted. Some people cried. Others clapped until their hands turned red. Behind me, the doors opened. 2 FBI agents escorted Lucinda and Garrett through the staff exit. No one followed. No one watched.
Except me.
As the boardroom emptied, I stood for a moment by the window and let the noise fade. That morning had begun with one memory I couldn't shake. Me, 22, elbows deep in an Excel spreadsheet at 3 a.m. The CFO had quit unexpectedly. The auditors were on their way. Lucinda had stood behind me in her robe, whispering, "Don't tell anyone. You did a good job." No credit. No recognition. I'd been the fixer. The cleaner. The invisible shield they used. But not anymore. Downstairs, the atrium brimmed with whispers and eyes. Garrett pushed through the crowd, red-faced, voice cracking as he shouted, "We're the ones who built this company." From behind me, a calm voice rose, an intern from accounting.
"No.
You're the ones who nearly destroyed it. Have you ever been the one who fixed everything, only to be blamed for breaking it? That moment when they turn on you not because you failed, but because you no longer play by their rules. If you've been there, drop a comment number 9 below. Now, let's finish this." The space fell silent. Moments later, I stepped forward to the podium. "Starting today," I repeated, "Drew Enterprises is no longer run by blood. It's run by truth." The applause surged like a wave. Dramatic, raw, unstoppable. The lobby's lighting dimmed slightly, and then a spotlight bloomed over the central logo above my head. Somewhere, the company anthem played, a bold orchestral swell replacing the low thrum of fear that had haunted these halls for too long. As agents led Lucinda and Garrett away through a side corridor, I caught a glimpse through the glass door. Lucinda sat in the back seat of a black SUV, her hand pressed to the window, gazing at the tower one last time like it was a dream vanishing in smoke. A camera caught the moment Chelsea's lipstick rolled from her handbag and bounced on the steps as she was escorted out, silent, pale, eyes vacant. The image flooded social media within minutes. That evening, I returned to my office. Alone. I clicked on the single light switch and let the warm glow spread slowly across the room. On the wall above the bookshelves, my grandfather's portrait hung quietly. For the first time, I looked at it not with guilt, not with longing, but with belonging. I nodded, barely breathing. A soft chime on my laptop. Inbox. One new message. Subject. Invitation. National Young CEOs Summit. The body of the message read, "We're impressed by how you've handled the Drew transition. Would you consider speaking?" Attached below, a confidential note. If you ever consider selling Drew Enterprises, please let us be your first call. No threats. No demands. Just interest. A choice. A second ping echoed as another email arrived, and signed and encrypted. Thanks for clearing the darkness. I stared at it for a moment, fingers frozen over the keyboard. The real cleanup had begun, and this time it was mine to finish. My family gave me nothing but a name. I rebuilt what they tried to burn, with fire of my own. The auditorium shimmered with quiet reverence. The National Young CEOs Summit had drawn titans from every corner of the country, visionaries, heirs, disruptors. And now me. The woman they once wrote off as a scandal. I stood at the podium, breathing steadily, palms anchored. Behind me, the screen displayed a single image, Drew Enterprises' new logo, clean, gold, and unfettered by old legacies. When I inherited Drew Enterprises, it wasn't a gift. It was a battlefield. What I found wasn't just mismanagement, it was rot. But here's what they didn't expect. That someone who'd been pushed to the edge would know exactly where to rebuild. For a second, I froze, not from fear, but from memory. I saw myself again, at 8 years old, peeking into the old boardroom through a cracked door. Grandpa was giving a speech. Lucinda stood next to me, whispering sharply, "His clever mind only adds to the chaos." I hadn't been allowed in. Now I was center stage, and no one could speak over me. The silence broke into a swell of applause, then a standing ovation. I saw it from the corners of my eyes. Disbelief softened into awe. But I didn't bask in it. I simply nodded and walked off stage with purpose. Hours later, back at headquarters, I stood under the atrium skylight of the newly renovated tower. Where once marble had loomed cold and untouchable, now glass and light danced with transparency. Our new mission statement, etched into the central wall in brushed silver.
Truth.
Accountability. Legacy reimagined. In the press room, reporters gathered for the strategy announcement. I walked to the front, not with armor, but with certainty. "We are launching the Maxwell Drew Foundation," I began, a scholarship fund named after my grandfather for first-generation students in business and ethics. And in Q2, we'll begin our mentorship network for young entrepreneurs, prioritizing transparency training. Flashbulbs lit up. A journalist in the third row raised his hand. "Miss Drew, any plans to reconnect with Lucinda or Chelsea?" I paused, looked him in the eye. I cut that connection the day they chose money over meaning. That chapter is closed. A hush settled as another reporter stood. "Miss Drew, The media once painted you as unstable, even unfit. How do you see that now? I smiled faintly. The truth doesn't need a defense team. Just time to breathe. Later, in the main hallway, a young staffer approached me nervously. She couldn't have been more than 23. "Miss Drew," she stammered. I used to watch interviews of you on TV. I never thought I'd get to work under someone like you." I met her gaze, steady. "Now you will. And soon others will too." She handed me a file. Her hands trembled. Near the corner lounge, a small glass-walled classroom buzzed with laughter. It was part of our new initiative, Family Accessible Workspace. A little girl peeked out and wandered toward me. "Are you the boss lady?" she asked, big brown eyes blinking. I crouched down. "Depends. Do you want to be?" She nodded shyly. "I like offices. They smell like pencils." I laughed for the first time in days. One of the assistants from our media team entered. "There's a request for an exclusive interview from one of the networks who ran hit pieces during the lawsuit." I shook my head. "Tell them, I only speak to those who respect truth." By nightfall, I was back in my apartment, just me and the city skyline. I poured tea, barefoot, and watched the gold-lit windows blink like distant galaxies. On the wall, I'd finally hung 2 frames, my grandfather's photo and a framed scan of my CEO appointment letter. Next to it, my new nameplate, Lainey Drew, founder of the New Drew. My phone buzzed. Caller ID. Undisclosed line, Zurich. A smooth voice spoke when I answered. "Ms. Drew, we've been watching. We're prepared to invest $500 million into your expansion strategy. No conditions, just belief in the new dynasty you've built." I turned slowly toward the window. Below, Drew Tower glowed like a second sunrise. "Not bad," I whispered, for the discarded one. Just as I was about to close my laptop, a courier knocked. He handed over a single ivory envelope, no sender, no seal. Inside, a handwritten note. "You were never the problem. You are the threat to their illusion." No name, no return address. I folded it carefully, slid it into my desk drawer, and turned the lock. In the quiet, I reopened my inbox and began typing a new subject line. Expansion. Europe, Q1. In the background, soft piano chords spilled from the speaker system. I let the sound wash through me, no longer rising out of vengeance, but clarity. And for the first time, peace didn't feel like surrender. It felt like legacy. I used to believe that surviving meant staying quiet, holding things together in silence. But now, I wake up every day free from manipulation, from guilt, from the illusion that blood is thicker than betrayal. The truth is simple. Loyalty is earned, not owed. And when you choose dignity over compliance, you stop being their victim. You become your own protector. Those who rise through fire do not fear ashes. Have you ever walked away from everything just to find yourself? Share your story in the comments. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone. And if you think this story shook something inside you, wait until you hear what happened when another daughter inherited more than just a name.